Welcome to AFibulous Life, Unlimited Conversation, the podcast where we explore what it really means to live, adapt, and thrive with atrial fibrillation. Hosted by Jim Kaveney, this is a space for real stories, expert insights, and honest conversations about heart health, resilience, and life beyond diagnosis, because AFib doesn't define you. And with the right support, your life can still be unlimited.
Hello, and welcome to AFibulous Life, Unlimited Conversation, becoming your own center of excellence. Hi, I'm Jim Kaveney, and I'm wearing a bow tie today because this is not only the first episode of AFibulous Life, Unlimited Conversation, but it's also my very first podcast ever. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyways because why not, right? Let's have some fun. Let's have a good conversation, and let's see where this goes. 7 years ago this month, I was going through my final cardiac ablation for my diagnosis of AFib. And I've been 7 years AFib free. Now I'm celebrating that. So the bow tie, everything else, and the opportunity to have a chance to talk to you all about where we're going. And so before that final ablation, what happened to me as well was at the ripe old age of 38, I was diagnosed with AFib. I'm now 52, so 14 years after that diagnosis. A lot has changed. But I was diagnosed at 38, was raising a family, building a business, going through multiple cardioversions, multiple ablations, as I've discussed, and also the implementation of a pacemaker. Because at the later stage of my diagnosis, I had shifted into what is known as tachybrady syndrome, and I was suffering from 60 pauses per month at 6 seconds apiece. Not a good situation, and so that's why they ultimately went ahead and put in my pacemaker. And so I'm grateful for that. Right now, the pacemaker doesn't do much; it just kind of sits in there. I use that as an example, as an excuse. So if my much bigger teenager boys, as they come after me, I kind of just turn quickly to them and joke and say, hey, can't hit me because of the pacemaker. But anyways, at the end of the day, when your heart is racing out of control, you don't need a lecture. You need a conversation. And that's what this is all about. This podcast is called Unlimited Conversation because no one gets through AFib alone. Not me, not anybody, not ever. So on this show, our goal is to hear from patients who are navigating this every single day. We're going to be able to talk to cardiologists who are advancing the treatment, as well as electrophysiologists too, who more so live in the rhythm space. We're going to talk to behavioral health experts who understand fear and resilience, and also trying to find that way, that courage to move forward through a diagnosis. But in order to become a center of excellence, we also need to talk about nutrition and exercise. But more importantly, we also need to talk about the caregivers, those that wrap us in their arms and their hands as we are diagnosed and rolling through our diagnosis. So simply put, we also want to talk to people that take ownership of their lives following their diagnosis. This really helps to establish the breadth and the depth that we're going to try to get into in our conversations. So why does AFibulous Life exist? It really started from a couple of things, right? One, obviously my experience. And then a few years ago, I wrote this book, Unlimited Heart, How to Transform Your Pain into Purpose, which is a catalog of what I went through as an entrepreneur, as a patient, etc. But it was also a statement to say, I'm not going to sit back and let this just be me. I'm going to live through this. And so that percolated, and then I ultimately started my business where we focus on lifestyle modification and behavioral modification as well to help patients in their lives. But as I was sitting around one day, I was talking to a number of physicians, and they said to me, what we're finding is patients no longer care about how long their lives are. They care about how good their lives are. So give me 10 quality years. Don't give me 20 years that might be crappy. And we don't want that. Nobody wants that. And so I thought to myself, they want a fabulous life. And then, of course, the play on words is, well, they have AFib, so they need to have an AFibulous life, right? And so that's the whole point of what we're doing today. And I realized something, though. We have brilliant space specialists out there, as I mentioned, the cardiologists, the electrophysiologists, you name it, the primary care doctors that work with you as well. But we don't always have an integrated conversation. And that's why we're going to make this point very clear with what we're doing in this on AFibulous Life, is we're going to try to help and create with you a true center of excellence. It's not just a hospital designation, it's also a collaboration. And so with AFibulous Life, what we're building is a conversation between patients, providers, science, lifestyle, fear, and ultimately courage as well. Now, in the next upcoming episodes, we'll sit down with leading voices in cardiology to break down simply and clearly so you can understand what's happening inside your own heart. This will ultimately signify to yourselves like, hey, I'm taking authority of what's inside of me. It's going to give you access to information. Now, there are worlds of information out there, wonderful resources. My friend Melanie True Hills from stopafib.org, she has a vast amount of education that is out there. Without question, it's lovely. I've gone through a lot of it myself to educate myself, but we also want to have the ability for you guys to have a conversation and to listen to some of our providers. So as we go forth and we build out this personal center of excellence, let's talk a little bit about what these pillars are going to be. And this is what's going to be when we integrate the guests into this, right? So we're going to have ownership. We're going to do future patient spotlight stories. So I'm going to ask patients to join us. Dive in, share, open up. Be real at the end of the day. Be real about their experience. We're going to talk about education. We're going to have some expert interviews as we talked about. We're going to talk about execution because education is one thing, right? You can learn and do things, but if you don't apply it, what's the point? So we're going to have the execution side of things. So I'm going to have some of my partners from Nudge Health are going to be on here talking about the lifestyle approaches that we can take. They're the experts when it comes to that. What about the environment in which you live? How about the caregivers and the community leaders? Let's focus on caregivers because I think the caregivers need to have as much attention as well as the patients themselves, because the caregivers tend to let themselves slip while they're taking care of others. But I always use this kind of connotation or the verbiage when we all get on a plane and it says, hey, if in the case of an emergency, we lose oxygen and the oxygen masks deploy, please put your mask on first before helping others. And what does that tell you? That ultimately tells you that you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of somebody else. So to the caregivers, we're going to have conversations with caregivers as well. And then what about community leaders? Because I think at the end of the day, we do feel, and I know I felt personally when I was diagnosed, that I felt like I was out on an island by myself, even though I was getting beautiful care from my physicians here at Dartmouth up in New Hampshire. I was getting beautiful care. They ultimately saved my life, but there was some gaps in what I was going through. And I felt for the most part that I was the only one out there diagnosed with AFib, even though I know that is not the case, given the fact the raw numbers of AFib are increasing expeditiously, and they will by 2030 be over 12 million patients in the United States. And then globally, I think we're pushing 50, 60 million as well. Maybe we're already there. But then the other thing, which I think is so important, and I mentioned this in my book multiple times, that it worked for me, was if my mind was strong, my heart was weak. And what did that do for me? That provided me in my own mind to say, hey, my heart is not doing what it's supposed to be doing for me, but my mind can. My mind can help me get over some of these challenges until I was able to figure out with my physicians the physical aspects of what were bringing me down from my AFib. And so we're going to be talking to psychologists and performance coaches. And we want to get a whole slew of different ideas and concepts around how do we make ourselves, our mind stronger. Because when the heart and the mind are aligned and strong, there isn't anything you cannot take on. So each pillar we will discuss will become a deeper conversation in future episodes with the people who live and lead in these areas. Now, When we talk about the battle of the heart and the mind, just as I mentioned before, we're going to talk openly on the show about anxiety, mortality, and fear of episodes, right? When will something else happen to me? Mortality, as often I've talked about quite a bit in my conversations and in my keynote addresses, is it's nothing to fear, right? We're all going to do it, unfortunately. We're all going to die at some point. So it's what are we going to do in between the time that we're born and the time that we expire? We don't know when that will be. I went to a university where a motto was Carpe Diem, seize the day. So let's do that. Let's try to figure this out. This doesn't mean we're going to go out and fire away and be indiscriminate and not safe and considerate about what we need to do. But it's more so about like, how do we go out and live? Let's not live in fear. Let's live in opportunity to become the strongest persons that we can become. And the other aspect that we're going to be tying into this, which I'm really excited too, so we're going to do a lot of talking, but we're also going to do a lot of cooking. So we're going to be launching a Fabulous Life kitchen, which I'm so excited about because we're going to be engaging with chefs across the country to really take on the kitchens that we all live in, right? Because, man, I would love to go downstairs, which I do have access to a significant amount of chocolate, and I'd love to dive into that left and right. But I know that I can't always do that. So we're going to have real conversations inside of kitchens, inside of restaurants, real environments with chefs and nutritionists, because lifestyle doesn't live in a clinic. It lives out in the world. It also explains that we don't have to just let it go, and we don't have to live on boring food. We can have exciting food. We can have tasty food. And the other key aspect, which I think is really fun about what we're going to do, is we're going to talk about the cultural aspects of each of our backgrounds. Now, me being Irish and everything else and German, right? We know that food is really good, but in some cases, I can't really often say that the Irish are known for being world-class experts in cuisine. So I'll rely on my wife's experience being an Italian, and we know Italian food is amazing, right? So we're going to be diving into those different things. But what about the Latino population? What about the African American population? What about just populations, the Indian population, the Chinese population, you name it? We're going to tackle all of those and figure out better ways to cook that food so we can keep the cultural aspects of what you are all about, but also make sure that it's heart friendly and AFib friendly at the end of the day. So like I mentioned to you, we're going to have the chefs, we're going to have conversations with nutritionists, but I also want the patients, you guys, to bring this into us as well. And how's that going to happen? So I'm going to ask you periodically, you can email me and send in some recipes from your families. And I'd love to get some of your famous moms or your dad's recipes, your grandparents' recipes, and say, hey, this is delicious. It includes a whole bunch of bad stuff in it. It tastes great. How do we go ahead and repurpose that? Make it into the same thing, keeping its kind of integrity of flavor, taste, and everything else, but just tweaking it ever so slightly to make it a little bit better for you in the long run. And then we're going to also have physicians learning from patients. We're going to have communities supporting one another. And our key aspect too is rural clinics building access. We want people and families to become educated advocates because we know that excellence becomes contagious when conversation is open. Now, I know this has just been me, and this is the first one that we're going to start with today. But this is just the beginning. And I want to end specifically and with clarity. In the coming weeks, you're going to meet people who are defining what it means to live with AFib. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose one pillar this week. This is my challenge to you. Choose one pillar and commit to it. Because we know your diagnosis may change your rhythm, but it doesn't define your excellence. Welcome to AFibulous Life, where conversation becomes transformation. Till next time, I'm Jim Kaveney, and stay unlimited.